and a warm welcome back to the KillerHERTZ Mercedes channel, and I hope you're safe and well. This video you of course join me with my SL63 AMG, which is the R231 model SL. Now my car is a pre-facelift model. Now facelifting is what manufacturers do halfway through the car's life cycle, where they change bits and pieces to make them look more updated. Now in the case of the R231 model, what they did is change the rear lights to make them completely red. Now the innards are exactly the same, but they got rid of this white part and make the entire thing red moulded. Now, of course, you could go to Mercedes and get yourself a pair of these yourself, which you're looking at probably about £1,000 a piece. You don't want to do that. What you can do instead, though, is get yourself some decent quality automotive tape. Now, this stuff you can actually fit onto the light, and if you do it correctly, it looks completely perfect and is like the facelifted light. This video, I'm going to show you exactly how you do that. So, let's get started.
So, as I just mentioned, make sure that you source yourself a decent, high-quality automotive light tint. Don't opt for a cheap version. As with anything, it's a case of you get what you pay for. This tint here is of fairly thick construction and should be ideal for this modification. Next up, get yourself a set of vinyl wrapping tools. Now my set includes a squeegee, some application tools and also a sharp cutting knife. Now you could use scissors I suppose to apply this with, but if you want a proper professional finish then a knife is essential. And finally, you'll be wanting to get yourself a hairdryer to soften the tint into place, removing any creases which may appear, etc. Now don't use a heat gun or you'll almost certainly burn and melt all the tint. With your new tint in hand, as well as all the correct application tools required, make your way outside to the car and give your light clusters a decent clean, making sure that all dirt, dust and tiny contaminants have been removed fully. If you miss anything at all, they'll be visible under the tint, causing air bubbles and will let down the entire appearance, possibly resulting in you having to completely remove and reapply the tint once again. So ensure you clean these lights as much as possible to the best of your ability. Now there are a couple of different methods of cutting out the correct size of tint for the area required. First is to align up the tint directly to the brake light cluster, ideally with tape so it sits flush against the light and not flapping around in the wind. And then either trace out with a pen the size required so you can cut it out later off the car. You can use the tint as a kind of tracing paper and then you just use the pen to mark out the exact size in the area which is required. Once off the car, use the area which you've just marked out on the tint and cut round with the wrap knife to ensure that you get the correct size, making it as smooth as possible. I'll straighten out or smooth the lines once on the lens to ensure the perfect fit. Now the second option, which is by far the more accurate method, is to position the tint up to the light cluster, then tape it into position, and then with the knife carefully score out the rough size of the area you require. However, make sure that you give yourself at least 2 cm extra around each side. That's another 2 cm of tint beyond where you've marked the score line. The reasoning for this extra amount is to ensure that you have enough material to cover the required area. Now when you start bending the tint around a curved surface, you never can be 100% sure you have enough, so by adding this extra amount fixes this issue. Peel off the backing plastic to reveal the adhesive side, ready to be applied to the light cluster. Now try to position it as closely as you can to the correct position. Do not worry however if it's not 100% correct at this point. You can remove it and reposition it again if required. With your hairdryer and squeegee in hand, work your way from one end of the tint to the other, slowly removing any small air bubbles trapped underneath. Remember, if the overall position of the tint isn't correct at any point, simply remove the entire thing and reposition once again. The hairdryer will aid this when you heat up the tint. In this shot you can see I actually have the entire tint way too high. At the bottom you can see the white clear lens poking through. I had to remove it completely and start again. Easy enough to fix and no big deal. If you're using the first method of completely cutting out the template away from the car, the very same principle applies here. Simply position the tint into place and slowly remove any air bubbles, starting from one end and then working your way to the other. Now remember to take your time with this modification. You're never going to get it correct the very first time you do it, and if you get a large enough roll you should have enough to give it multiple attempts should you make any errors and you want to try again. Have a good look around all of the edges, checking that they're all in the correct position. Now you may need to trim any further excess as required with the knife. So here it is, the final result of this modification. Now as long as you take your time and you do it carefully, you should get a brilliant result. Unless you actually run your finger across the light, meaning you can actually feel the difference in texture, you'd be hard pressed to spot that these are actually covered in tint, even if you stand right next to the car's lights. Now I know some of you will be watching this thinking this is a terrible idea and an SL should never be covered in any form of wrap or tint. But remember, this can be reversed in less than 1 minute back to the stock look, so it's the perfect modification. Now you may be asking, does this affect the actual light output or more importantly the colour of the indicators? No, not in the slightest. If the lens I was covering was actually orange, then yes, we'd have a problem. But as the tint is covering a clear, white lens, and it's the actual LEDs themselves which are orange, the light output and the colour are not affected at all. See for yourselves. And here's a couple of final shots, just showing you the before and after, so you can see exactly what the difference is between the pre-facelift and the facelift looked light clusters.
Okay, so that pretty much wraps up this video. Now it's a real simple modification for anyone with an SL to do. It only takes about an hour or so to do both sides, really cheap to action, and if you don't like it, you can always rip it off and revert the car back to standard. Looking at it, you wouldn't even know that these have actually got wrap on them. It looks like the original parts. So if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like it, please consider clicking on that subscribe button, as well as the bell icon, so you're notified as soon as I upload new videos and content. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, which does help the channel grow. Until next time, thanks a lot for watching and support. Cheers.